Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of The Hunter's Way. Today I have my first guest speaker on, one of my longtime friends, Mr. Avi Burai. Today's episode is going to be about diversification. If you want to say anything about...
Oh.
I don't know, I probably should have given you a chance to, introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I am an extremely tired, recently graduated European history major. So my attitude toward diversification is usually that it's the best thing for acquiring new knowledge. It's what you need.
Right on. So today's episode I want to start off talking a little bit about my own experiences with diversification. And I want to clarify early on that we're not really talking about diversity so much, more the act of changing something from non-diverse to diverse. So that in and of itself has real change on yourself, the world you live in, your environment, the culture around you, blah, blah, blah. So, my own experience with this started when I first joined the military, because here in Washington, especially Whatcom County, there's not that many black people. So I kind of grew up in just a sea of white faces, not really knowing what it's like to live in a diverse environment. Of course, I was raised in a household that taught me never to judge anybody by the color of their skin. You said you had the same experience.
Yeah.
But I really didn't know what it meant to exist in the world with other people that didn't look necessarily like me. Joined the military, boot camp, right away I realized, wow, there's a lot more black people in this country, and Asian people, and, Samoan people, people from the Philippines, than I originally thought. And so that was kind of just a wake-up call, like, wow, this country looks a lot different than I imagined it. And then right off the bat, I get sent to my first ship out in Japan, and just, it's a complete culture shock for me. And right away I realized that this environment I'm living in is full of so many people from so many different walks of life, all coming together to form this cohesive unit that is a lot more, how would you put it, fluid, I think.
Ah, Navy puns. Hilarious.
Really? I don't even know how that was a Navy pun, but still.
It's a boat, and you use the fluid. That's the joke.
This guy.
That's the
He's a
joke, ladies and
freaking
gentlemen.
prankster. But in all seriousness,
A
I
cohesive
think...
alloy.
Yes. But in all seriousness,
Combination of metals.
I think all of those different cultures being blended together, and people from different experiences, different backgrounds, you name it, made for a better workforce and a better environment to be in versus the one I grew up in out here.
Yeah, that was good. Well, and I will agree with my distinguished colleague that this neck of the woods tends to be
Distinguished.
distinguished. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Give me a pipe and a slow clap. So, in general, this neck of the woods tends to be pretty white. So, but the further south you go, the more diversity there is. And once you get somewhere down towards Seattle, so I went to college in Tacoma, and Tacoma has a ton more varieties of people than Bellingham does, and so does Seattle. So the more time I spent down there, the more time you sort of get used to, because even though that everybody treat everybody equally, when you first meet people who are a different racial ethnicity than you are, sometimes you'll do what did the kids call it, microaggressions, because you have no actual idea, because you've never interacted with African Americans or Latino Americans, at least not in a pretty constant setting. But once you get to the point where eventually it's just normal. But there's definitely a period where you're like, oh, and that's also sort of an internal reflection where you realize how white the place you grew up is,
Right.
in comparison to literally everywhere else in the country, except for maybe Nebraska, I guess, or South Dakota.
And that's kind of a weird thing for me, too, because I'm mostly white, but I have, like, a quarter Mexican in me, and it doesn't really...
I thought you were half.
No, my dad is half.
Oh, your dad's half.
So I'm a quarter.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really show through because I have none of the culture. He was adopted, and so we were both raised in a super white household, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I love Grandma and Grandpa Hunter, but, like, we don't have any of our Hispanic culture in us. Like, little to none. I think...
Always diversification.
I want to touch back on that thing with me joining the military. Like, being exposed to all those different cultures and being put in an environment where, I'm being exposed to a lot of different ways of thinking and people with different backgrounds and upbringings, like, definitely helped me understand more about the world around me. It definitely gave me more tools in my toolbox to handle social situations.
Toolbox of life.
Toolbox of life. Did you want to touch on your own experiences with diversification? Because I don't think the camera was recording the last time we talked about it.
I'll jump on the music bandwagon. Yeah, because my experience with diversification, I mean, I worked at a trucking company for a couple years up in Bellingham, and the stereotype of the trucking industry is, the classic old white people, Big Ben, this year's rubber duck kind of shit. And it's for my two people who know the movie Convoy, and or the song, and or the Grand Theft Auto 5 radio track. This Convoy is on Grand Theft Auto 5 soundtrack. And it's not like that. There is, one or two of the classic, stereotypical old white man drivers, but we had, I think our best driver was a Hindu guy, we had African Americans, we had Slavs, a bunch of Slavs, we had one Ukrainian, and then we had three Russians. And then, I think our other best driver was an old white lady. Yeah. She hated her kids, so she always would drive all the time. So, anyway, and then when we started doing brokerage, I made sure, I think we primarily used a Hindu-run trucking company, because their drivers, they didn't sleep, man. They're pretty good. So we used to just use them, or one that I think most of the drivers were Hispanic. Because I couldn't really talk to the drivers, because most of the drivers didn't speak English and well enough that I could, like, give instructions, so I always had to go through the management down to the, So, anyway, and then, obviously when I was in college, because in college...
But you definitely talked about how diverse the workforce was, but how did that help you?
Oh.
That's the whole point here.
Well, and the obvious, it's sort of what I touched on earlier, where once you start interacting with people that are of a different, race or color or creed than you are, the more used to it you get, and the more, it gives a concrete form to the idea that your parents try to tell you, which is that everybody, no matter how they look, you should treat them the same and equally, which is a great sentiment. But if everybody looks kind of the same, it's hard for you to, like,
it's hard to grasp.
It's hard to attach that to anything.
Yeah.
You understand and you believe that, but you never have a chance to really practice that. And then once you start doing that, you start, it's a great kind of two-way street where you have your own personal belief that this is the way it should be, and that turns out when you actually start applying it, it's 100% accurate, 100% right.
Right, and I think a lot of that has to deal with just how people are taught from a young age, right? So for us, even though we grew up in, like, predominantly white part of the country, we don't have a racist bone in our body because we were taught from a young age that, hey, when in life, when it comes to the time in your life that you meet people that look different from you, you should treat them the same way you treat all these people here. And so we didn't hear anything about, oh, the black people this, or the brown people that, or the Asian people this, or the Hindu people that, or the Middle Eastern people this. It's like, if you are constantly exposed to that sort of language and that environment, of course, when you finally meet people like that, you're going to be off-put by them, you're going to always be scared of them, and you're going to treat them differently than, other people of your skin color.
Yeah.
So it's, it starts when you're young. Even if you don't live in a diverse place, you can not be racist.
Yeah. Well, and the important thing to remember, too, is racism, before the great weird revolution of the mid-1930s, racism used to be a lot more diverse, even in the white people part of the thing. Because Italians and the Irish were considered to be degenerate races. Because the social problem among the people who have concerns. They have concerns about what's happening in the world.
Is that a reference to something?
This is a reference to TERFs. People have concerns about the transgender agenda. People have concerns about the African American population.
I'm just concerned.
I'm just asking questions. The Karen. The immortal
Karens.
Karen, yeah.
No, not the Karens. The older version. The evolved version. The Susan.
No!
It's the Susan!
It's right. Oh, it shows the evolution screen from Pokemon Red where it's Karen is evolving! Susan! Got a bunch of cats running around her.
Just... This is so bad. Anyway, yes. The Susan.
The Susan.
Anyway, continue.
Stroking her beard.
Hey, Susans might have beards,
Hey, yeah. Gender neutral term, really. So anyway, they have concerns about the Italians and the Irish problem. But it's diversification starts with your mindset. You have to be open to being able to interact with anybody on their level, at least as closest to it as you can. And once you get that, and you start applying it,
And there really aren't any exceptions, either. Like, I wanted to put this in a future video, but I guess it fits here. You ever get those people that, you start these conversations with them, and they say, I'm not racist, but... And then whatever follows is racist. It gets me thinking, if you follow I'm not racist with a but, you really should just stop talking right there. There should never be a but, comma, this and this and this and this, because that just infers that what you're about to say could be construed as racist, and it probably is.
Yep,
Yeah. Like, you're not open to ideas at that point. You're not open to diversification if you're like, well, yeah, I'm accepting of these people, but... But what?
Maybe they need to just get a job.
I'm not racist, but I'm concerned.
I have concerns.
It's
a great word for
it's
it. That's what they do, man. I have concerns about the agenda.
The agenda? What agenda? The Black Lives Matter agenda. The
maybe
gay rights agenda. What agenda? People just want to fucking be treated equally.
I support the right of gay couples to marry each other and have assault rifles to defend their weed farms.
Yes, I love that meme. That's a great meme. I love it. I want my gay neighbors to be able to defend their weed farm with assault rifles.
Right.
Right, and that's the world we should live in.
The weirdest hybrid of, right and left-wing ideology.
Defend them from the birds that aren't real.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
All those CIA security cameras disguised as pigeons. So, I do want to touch on possibly what the opposite of diversification looks like.
Segregation.
Yeah, duh. Like, no-brainer.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the opposite of diversity, right? And so,
It is
you could say what we have here maybe is the opposite of diversification. Like I said, it's mostly white part of the country.
Well, I'd like to see what the composition of Western is. I think Western's got a good mix.
Western's a lot of Asian students.
Well, I mean, that's because they can afford it to come over here from the big
It's
China.
one of the closest places from across the Pacific, so this is like the easiest place to go.
Yeah, I guess you have to get through that part of Washington that's like an arm to get to UW. Yeah, we had a lot of, because UW had a bunch of Asians.
Anyway,
too, I guess.
point being is
A lot
maybe
of
you don't have to have like an even split of all these different people to be a diverse place, because I mean, we turned out okay, and we're from a mostly white part of the country. Diversity, I guess, looks like what you teach people, and it's kind of in your culture,
Yeah.
right? Because your culture is defined by the stories that you tell. And that's definitely something I'm going to return to in a future video.
And white people like to tell themselves they're not racist, even though sometimes they are.
Right? But if the
they're not
stories...
racist, but they have concerns.
They always have concerns. But if the stories you're telling are not of diversity and of inclusion, like the stories we were told growing up, then your culture is not diverse. Maybe it doesn't have to look like it on the outside, though it definitely helps. The stories and your culture have to reflect diversity.
Well, and the big thing for me is you have to attack what the redlining and things that prevented integration in the United States in the North. Because what the North figured out pretty quickly is instead of what the South does, which is they rely on the fact that they had an ingrained political establishment that would allow them to legally bar people from various places, the North just figured out they could design housing districts to exclude people. And so that's what redlining is. Redlining is the creation of an African American district, essentially. Or basically any minority. There was an Ortho Jew district in Seattle for a little bit.
Is that how Chinatowns come to be?
Pretty much, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the idea of like a white neighborhood or white community is created by restrictive and racist housing laws. And a lot of that is still on the books. My dad's a lawyer, and he runs into weird, shitty, terribly racist housing laws up here from time to time. They still exist. Most of them are blue laws, so they don't apply anymore, but they were never repealed or anything. So, fighting that and integrating communities and then raising up, the poverty level by pumping money into African American communities under the guise of local activist committees, just sort of level the playing field a little bit. And then this will diversify places of higher learning and neighborhoods in general. The more integrated you can get, the more evenly the money is spread too. Back when forced busing was a thing, there was not a huge disparity in public schools in this country because the white kids had to go to the same school as the black kids, so the white people money had to go to that school. And then once Reagan ended forced busing, and also did a whole bunch of shit to food stamps, dude's basically Antichrist. He also created a huge disparity in schools. So, the white parents were able to get their kids into the shiny house on the hill, while everyone else had to stay in the schoolhouse that was down in the mud, and all the funding went with them. So, yeah, no, because it used to be pretty even.
And it never makes sense to me about like the lack of funding that minority districts don't receive.
It's because
if say you're in charge of a city, right?
Yeah.
And you know that there's these portions of your city that need more help, that are like either crime-ridden or poverty-ridden, or they have crumbling infrastructure, and everything's just falling apart. Like, why do you bother giving more funding and more everything to the districts that don't freaking need it, to give them like a shiny new freaking building on the corner that doesn't help them whatsoever, versus half that amount of money into the poor district would have so many lasting impacts and positive change on the people that live there.
Well,
it's just a better investment.
It's two things. First, bureaucratic inertia. It's way easier to just do this because it's what everyone else did before you. It's painless, and there's not a possibility that people will yell at you for giving money to the crime zone. Because people who have concerns will see that you're giving money to a poor, probably heavily minority district because of redlining, and they'll be like, why are you giving money to drug dealers? Think of the children. Won't somebody please think of the children?
And what about the terrorists?
What about the terrorists?
Oh, no.
They live in the shadows where we can't see them, so we need to take out all the streetlights. So that everything's a shadow, so I can't do anything.
That didn't even make sense.
It didn't even make sense. You don't make sense.
Karen's and Susan's don't make sense.
That don't make no sense.
Anyway, so people with concerns will go after you. At least that's what people think. I don't think people with concerns really care. The other one, besides bureaucratic inertia, the other reason people don't do that is because usually the reason that those districts get more money is because they have better lobbying ability. Because they have more money.
Fucking lobbying,
yeah,
dude.
so they're able to effectively control
That's another topic for
local
another
and state
video.
bureaucracies so that they can ensure a bigger piece of the funding pie because they have more resources to do it. And the poorer districts don't. Even though they need the money more, they don't have the infrastructure to force the government to give them what they need. And, even a fraction of what they need. And historically, these districts, their only interaction with the man tends to be police forces, because these areas, because they're so poverty-stricken, tend to have a lot of crime. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where you don't provide any social services or help for people who need it most, and then as a result, they have no way to really make a living in a lot of cases, leads to a lot of broken homes, leads to a lot of crime and drugs, and then you send in police forces to deal with the problem area, and then that creates a cycle of incarceration and chemical dependency and an endless loop. So the only way you fix that is you...
Bro, we're talking about so many things that I'm going to have to break down in future episodes.
You pull back the police force, and you attach the social worker. You know, you do what they had in the 50s before Nixon cut everything, and then Reagan actually cut everything. You take away mental health and treatment stuff from the cops. That's not the cops' job. Cops' job is not to, deal with anything other than drug distributing. And even then, they really shouldn't deal with that. They should really be attacking the distribution networks that the cartels set up that can easily replace any severed node. It's actually very elaborate. I'm very impressed with their hard work. Good job. Gold star.
Good job.
Gold star, cartels. I have concerns.
I have concerns.
I have concerns.
Oh no. All right.
This episode title better be called "I Have Concerns."
I'll put that in the comments. Look. Okay. So I think
diversification, and then like 5 enter bars down. I have concerns.
I have concerns about diversification.
I'm gonna comment that. I'm gonna go in your fucking video.
No, that's gonna be the description. Okay.
Good.
That's it for this episode of The Hunter's Way. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.